what were your thoughts and feelings about the infamous Carlos Ezquerra cover with the chain-holding boy and the policeman about to be whipped?
Well, the first thing about the cover that basically got Action banned is, as is well known now, that it was the colourist who really was responsible for that in a way, because the chap lying on the ground, who's painted blue, is actually a civilian, and so the policeman's helmet being nearby, there's an assumption it's a copper. It's not, it's just an ordinary civilian. Okay, that said, it's still a pretty lurid cover. And I had long moved on to 2000 AD by the time this came out, and I can still see it so clearly in my mind when they were going further and further, that it was missing the point. It's not to be more daring, it's just to be different and to be more appealing, which is, you can do that without being gratuitous. Anyway, so they said, what do you think of this cover? And I looked at it and I went white. I went, oh my God, what, you know, like. And the sort of general feeling in the Action editorial offices at the time was, you know, hey, we've really shocked even Pat now, you know, which is actually missing the point of what we're trying to do here. But I mean, you know, it's nothing to do with me. I mean, the comic was autonomous. It had its own power and had to make its own decisions.
Were you surprised eventually that the comic had to be withdrawn and toned down because of the W.H. Smith threat of boycott?
I think it was inevitable, really, because it was a driverless car. It was going somewhere. There was nobody who was taking the wheel and saying, "Hey, we're going to pull this round." And this was all, to be fair to everyone, this was all new territory. None of us had been here before, so there was no real way of knowing how far one could go. And it was the 70s as well, where there was a sense of, you can go that much further. And I think a mistake that was made there was to assume, wrongly, that any publicity is good publicity. That's not true. And we learnt a bitter lesson from that, which we applied to 2000 AD. Anyone wanted to interview us? No. Nobody went on TV, nothing. No, we wouldn't do it. So we did, something positive did come out of Action. We learnt that the media might pretend to be friendly to us and say, hey, come on TV, well, we won't be too harsh to you. And then you had that unfortunate thing where that guy tears up Action on Nationwide or something, all those kind of things.
Leading on from that, just your general recollections of that sort of mid to late 70s period, the kind of atmosphere, the political climate, how that...
Sorry, can you hold on one second? I was going to quick second.
The time period, I'm trying to think.
Can I just write a quick question?
Yeah.
So you can ask it.
We're going to splice a lot of footage from mid to late 70s.
That's a good idea.
Set the tone for the...
Yeah, I'm actually trying to think. I think one of the things was I was working so bloody hard, you're sort of vaguely aware of all these things going on. There are a couple of things I can think of, but not much.
Okay, we're also recording. Just the audio, video's fine. Give myself a clapperboard.
Okay. All right.
I'll just do. This is just. I'll do it.
All right. So okay. So the times that Action was set in. With the 70s, the only thing I can remember is I think the 3-day week was going on in the middle of Action. So, the sort of lights were going out all over the building and so on. But it wasn't so much that things were happening that much at the time. They've been happening for the last decade, since around 66. And there were great social changes going on, and they were affecting every aspect of life. There was social revolution, different views of morality, drugs, changes in music, changes in film. And what I was doing on Action was not actually that revolutionary. It was just catching up with the rest of the world. In other words, I came into comics and just assumed that they would reflect all the kind of culture that I was growing up in and experiencing. And it was just discovering that comics were like 20 years out of date. And so it didn't actually feel that revolutionary to me to say, well, okay, why aren't comics reflecting the kind of world of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, heavy metal, movies like Dirty Harry, Clockwork Orange, Soldier Blue? Why are they in this kind of strange cultural ghetto? And so in some ways it was actually quite easy to bring it up to speed with the rest of the world.
Did you feel that the reason why Action received such a negative response from the establishment was partly because of this challenging of accepted stereotypes of children, and also did you and the other writers, enjoy shocking them?
Well, I in particular enjoyed challenging the establishment on things, and I think I probably more so than anyone else. But that doesn't mean to say it has to be necessarily gratuitous. For instance, I had a story called Sports Not for Losers, which is about a working class kid who sort of does well at sports and things, but goes through a period of being in a detention centre, which was actually a reflection of something that happened to my best friend when I was a teenager. He'd driven a car while it was uninsured, and so I kind of used those memories I sort of instructed a writer to sort of put them in, because I wanted the authenticity, because I think Clockwork Orange actually hadn't even... No, not Clockwork Orange, Scum. Scum hadn't actually come out at that time. I think it had been banned. But the kind of experiences that you'd see in Scum had happened to my friend, and he was a very dear friend of mine, and he was describing all these horrible things that happened in the detention centre. So I wanted to reflect those, and I think it's fair to say that that's sort of my attitude generally throughout my writing career, is to take an anti-establishment viewpoint on things. So that was perhaps unusual compared to other writers who might perhaps feel that to a lesser degree than me. But with me, it was very important. In other words, I needed to, reflect perhaps my own ghosts, my own demons, and why not?
And how much of that writing would you say was an extension of the girls' comic philosophy? For instance, things like Slaves of War, Orphan Farm, and those sorts of stories?
Action was influenced by girls' comics. I think when we started on Battle, we had assumed that we could more or less do a kind of male counterpart of many of the stories in girls' comics, and that was true to a limited extent. A very good example would be Charlie's War, which is really a girls' comic story. And the reason it works so well is because it follows girls' comic rules. So whereas, shall we say, if there had been a girls' comic story, that would have been